Greetings gamers, my name is Anto and today I want to talk to you about how I organize projects in LegendKeeper, how do I lay things out, and how do I use it to run my ongoing campaign. This video is sponsored by LegendKeeper. There'll be a link for you to pick it up down in the description below, but without further ado, let's dive straight into it. So when you go into LegendKeeper and you sign in, you're going to be presented with this screen where you've got a selection of projects to select. By default, you'll have an example project, but I have a bunch of different things. So we're going to go ahead into my homebrew world of Ishtar and load that up. And the main reason I like to use LegendKeeper is because of the map. If you don't care about a map, then there are a bunch of options other than LegendKeeper that will work just as well. And a lot of these tips are going to apply to that. But my main reason for using LegendKeeper is because I am very map forward when it comes to the way in which that I plan my campaigns, how I do my world building, and how I run my games. So here you can see the map of my current campaign, the Jewel Cities of Talavar, and you can see that it's absolutely covered in these pins. Each of these pins is a location, a monster, a magic item, a point of interest, a random encounter, or something along those lines. And the way that I tend to work, my general workflow in LegendKeeper, is that when I'm getting started, I just open the map, I look at the map, and I go, there, that place would be cool to have something, and I hit the right click and create page, and I make a new page from that. So before we dive into all of the other organizational stuff, I just want to talk a little bit about how I structure my map page, what I do with all of these pins. You can see that there's a bunch of different colors and shapes, and what do they all mean. So we're going to start top level, work our way right the way down. So at the very top level, anything that I'm put down that doesn't have one of these pin shapes to it is a significant natural thing. So we have various information here about waters, bodies of water, so the Gleaming Sea, the Cut, and a couple of different crossing points. We have this icon down here, which will take me to the map of the world. If I shift click it, that'll take us out to a new map that's got the entire world on it. Then going down at one level, we have the two different kinds of black backgrounded icons. This first one is a pin for the Jewel Cities. This is so that I can click it, hit the main tab, and I can write stuff about this area of the world whilst I've got the map open, because otherwise I need to go ahead and hit main in the tabs up here, and I can't see the map while I'm working on it. So putting a pin of the map that you're working on the map you're working on is a really great way to be able to edit its page while still seeing the map. Next we have the black banner shapes. These represent the different countries in this region. So we have Ngawe, the Unclaimed Lands, we've got the Desk Empire, the Howling Badlands, and then all of the different nations on the island of Or. If we go ahead and click into any of these, you can see that there's a bunch of different information about the nations here. This is really high level information. A lot of kind of the stuff that we cover in the Doppelgang video, which I'll leave a link to up here, and a bunch of secrets and information about these regions. Going down a tier, if we zoom in a little bit here, and we'll zoom into the area that my players are currently adventuring in. So if they're watching this, particularly you, John, turn off now. So these purple icons, they are the major cities. If we go ahead and click on those, we tend to have a city map and then our main page with a lot of information about the city. Very similar setup. Who's the ruler? Go through all of the doppelganger points and add some secrets there. Then we have the gold colored icons with the signposts. Those are for towns. Anywhere that's not as major of a settlement as a city gets one of these. And then if we zoom in, I'll show you a couple of other things that we have. So we have these ready icons with a skull. Those are notes for monsters. So throughout this world, I have several places where monsters exist, and that is where they are, regardless of level or anything else that's going on with quests. This is really useful if the players are traveling between point A and B and they go through a hex that has a dedicated monster on it. We might get a random encounter, you might get a new quest line with people who are having trouble with this monster coming to the party and asking them for help, all that kind of stuff. So I make notes of all of the monster and I just put their name and their approximate level, just so I've got a sense for how powerful the monster is going to be in relation to the players. That tells me whether I should front load the monster to them. So if they are level 5 and they go past a level 15 monster, I probably don't want to just random encounter the monster right there. But I might want to start dropping hints that there is a powerful monster in this area, something they can come back to at a later time and reinvestigate. Then we have these green icons with a sword or stars in them. Those are my icons for magical weapons and magical items. So anywhere there's a significant magical weapon or magical item in the world, that is going to appear with these little green icons here. And that allows me to sprinkle plot hooks throughout the world, get a sense of where different items are placed. And as the players begin to level up and they say, right, I'm really interested in getting hold of X item, then I can look at the items that I've placed and see if anything fits the vibe. Next, we have these pink pins that have got a variety of different icons on them. Some of them have got caves or bones or little towers. These are my set points of interest that aren't towns and cities or monsters, but they are not just a random encounter. So a really good example is the Cave of Screaming Tomorrows, where my players currently are. This is a fixed location that isn't a settlement, so it gets a pink icon, and all the information about it can be put into that pin. Then zooming in a little more, you can see that there are some small pins without icons that are a different color. These are my resource icons. So if we hover over some of them, you can see that there's copper in them, there are hills, there's silver, and there's coal. This is not essential, but it is really useful in the early stage of world building a region to be able to go, what physical resources are there? Where are they located? And then that'll give you a bunch of information about where settlements will pop up, what kind of conflicts arise because of these things, if there's border resources between two nations, all of that kind of stuff. It can add an extra level of depth to your high level world building. Next, we come to these brown square pins with various icons in them. These are my areas of natural information. So like mountains and woodlands and that kind of thing. So here we've got the Dragon's Wood, a cedar forest. That's all we know about it other than its name there. But anything that needs to be known about this location as we go along in playing the campaign will get put into that pin. And then finally, we have the white pins with a little question mark on them. Those are my random encounters. So a lot of those are things like traveling nobles. And in the notes, it'll be fake nobles on their way to some kind of job or con in the City of Dawn. Maybe they're spies for a neighboring country, trying to find some information on Timestone, which is a resource in the city. So a lot of these aren't super fleshed out. They're just 1 or 2 sentences to give me some creative ideas when it comes to planning out travel and planning out things for the players to do when they arrive in a new settlement. So let's say, for example, the players are on their way from the city of Malachite and they're heading towards the city of Dream. You can see that following the road, it's going to take them through a couple of hexes that contain these random encounters. One of them is going to be a group of disgruntled miners that can be located either in the city of Dream or in the city of, well, the town of Foxglove. So we don't know what they're disgruntled about, but it gives me a direction to go with. Oh, you're going to run into a group of miners. Is there any way we can tie that into the games that we've been playing recently or the stories that you're currently involved in and go from there? Or we could have severed heads, a bunch of severed heads being found beside the road. And this is tied to a bunch of other monsters and intrigue in that hex that's already noted down. And then when you do that a couple of 100 times, you end up with a map that looks like this. You can see particularly the area in which the players are at the moment, which is the Vale, which is over here. You can't even see the map for the number of pins because I wanted to make sure that anywhere the players go in that region, there's going to be something for them to do. Next, let's talk about how I organize what I call my compendium, which is all of the information in my world. All of that is going to be over here on the left in LegendKeeper. And first of all, I want to draw particular attention to these icons at the top. In LegendKeeper, you can drag a page up to this bar and it will give you a quick link to get to that page or to that headline page with a single click versus having to click through all of the nested things. So we're going to close all the nestings. And you can see on the left here that I've got a couple different GM screens. I've got my Pathfinder and my D&D 5e GM screens. We'll go through them in a little bit. I have also done a video where I give you a whole walkthrough of that. Then we've got a page for the adventures, the calendar, the compendium, which is where I just keep all of my world information in one place. Information on the players, some archived articles that I don't need anymore, a little legal page that I put in because I copied this page to make my LegendKeeper DM Bible, which I will link in the description. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. and then just a couple of test pages and some templates. Now we're going to start with this top bit here. This is the pin stuff. So we have the Jewel Cities of Talabar. This is what I can click to get back to this map at any time, or I could click the home button. Then we have factions. So if I go ahead and click this, this gives us a list of all the factions in my world. You can see some of them are hidden so that the players can't see them. Some of them aren't, and you click into them and the players will be able to see anything that isn't in the purple boxes, because those are secrets. And you can see the way I lay things out, just a setting guide snippet to say, hey, here's what this thing is, here's what everybody knows about this thing, some information about their operating location and who their leader is, and then a bunch of secrets, so their command structure, lists of NPCs that you might find in that faction, all that kind of. Then I do the same with the Pantheon. I break that down into the new gods, which is the current slate of gods in my world, demigods, which are lesser beings, and then primordials, which are ancient beasts. And if we go ahead and click into one of them, you can see very much the same information from the setting guide, some general like wiki style information, and then a bunch of secrets. Then we come to adventures, and you can see I've got a bunch of different headings in the adventure section. We've got adventure node. This is a board that gives me an idea of how to structure adventures. This is something that I messed around with to test out the boards feature in LegendKeeper, which allows you to create these kind of mind maps and relationship maps and those kind of things to get a sense for how an adventure would be structured. So a quest trigger, then some kind of travel, and then either some exploration, social, or combat encounter. A change of state, something happens that changes the information in the adventure. Then we either get rewards or speak to an NPC and rewards, or travel and speak to an NPC and rewards. And you can kind of repeat this loop as much as needed. You know, that anytime you have travel, you could then have another kind of encounter trigger based on that and go layer by layer. But I tend to work in session by session basis, so we do one significant encounter that might be a bunch of small combats, but it's one significant encounter, go to place and fight things. Then we have a page where I put all of my adventure ideas. Then we've got a collection of all the adventures that my players went through in their Ashk campaign. So you can see here we went through 111 adventures in that campaign, all of which are tracked here. And then we come to the Jewel Cities adventures. So in this main page, I've just made a note of some of the things that my players have expressed they want their characters to achieve or they're interested in. And then we have all of the adventures. So if I go ahead and click into one of these, you can see that I have a template set up, which gives me a space for recap, an area to say what the session date was, a summary, which I write ahead of time to say, here's how I think the session is going to go, a section where any critical information that I absolutely need to remember to divulge to the players, that lives in this box. And then we have the structure, where I go scene by scene how I imagine this going, the list of NPCs that I expect the players to encounter, and then the list of loot that I expect them to encounter. I will quickly jump over and talk about loot specifically, because I found this way of handling loot for Pathfinder really useful. So if I jump into my Pathfinder 2nd edition GM screen here, and you can see this is another example of the boards in LegendKeeper. Each of these is a link to another page. If I go treasure by level, you can see I've got a big table here. This is taken from the core rules of Pathfinder, from the Game Mastery Guide, I believe. And this table gives you an idea of, at each level, what is the total coinage and how many magic items of permanent and consumable types each player, well, the party as a whole, should receive along the course of their adventures. This has been really useful for me in a system like Pathfinder, where loot is baked into character progression to figure out how to award loot. So you can see that what I do is I list each item that they're awarded and cross it off versus different kind of items that they should be expected to get, so permanent or consumable. And it makes it really easy when it comes time to planning the adventures to go, right, okay, the players are currently level 4, they're a little bit lacking on, let's say, third level consumables. So let's go ahead and make sure they find a couple third level consumables in this adventure. Or about now is when they should start finding fifth level items. Let's have a look at the list of fifth level items, see if there's anything cool that jumps out at me that I think that could work for this adventure. Let's place that in the list of loot in our adventure tab. So if we go back here, in the loot, we'd place an item. So in this case, it was a lesser healing potion, and I made a note of where that is going to be located. I also put whatever coinage they're going to put, and I track that in that same table. And I have started noting when they get paid, because something that quite often happens is we'll finish a session, we'll finish an adventure right at the end of the night, and then everyone is like, oh, cool, we're finished, right, we got to go because we got to work in the morning, and we don't get to do the kind of bookkeeping of paying. And then in the week that happens between them and the next session, I'm like, did I pay them? Did they get paid? Are they poor? So that's how I keep a track of my adventures when it comes to prep. But when it comes to actually running the adventures, I do all of that through the calendar. So if we go ahead here and click on the calendar, the main page here, we have the picture of the Ishtar calendar. It's a 13-month, 28-day cycle. We have some information on the holidays as well as when the seasons start. This was really important to me in this campaign because I have used custom names like Solus and Calor before in my calendars, and with the exception of those 2 months, the players never remember where they are in the year. So this time I went with a really season forward naming scheme. So snowfall, you're in winter somewhere. You might not know where in winter you are, but you know that it's winter time. Midwinter, easy, you're in the middle of the season of winter, easy to know where you are. Same with mid-spring and midsummer. Then we've got some notes here on the ages of the world. My timeline is broken down into different ages, starting with the primordial age. This is where kind of the original gods took place, and we go all the way through to the current age, which is the age of chaos, marked by the players' actions in the last campaign when they opened the Ark of Chaos and started the apocalypse. They stopped it. It's fine, probably. Then I keep a note on holidays. We have some information on the timeline. This is really useful to start weaving together all the information in your world. So I have a list of all of the major events that have happened that might be relevant to this campaign, and as things come up, I add them to this. This gives me a sense of where were the players when this thing happened, what happened when the players were this age, that kind of stuff. And then the meat and potatoes of it is my calendar. So they are currently in the year 1165, and this is how I track all of my games every week. This is how I keep notes. This is how I know what we've done and how I plan for the next week using the previous week's information. So you can see we've got everything broken down into the day of the year. This is not super important to the players, but it's useful to me. Then we have the month, the day of the month, the moon cycle, because if it is nighttime, I would like to tell them what the moon is doing, what the moon looks like. That helps to give them some kind of verisimilitude and think that the world is a real world. And then we have events and notes. So if I scroll down here for a little bit, they didn't start until the summertime. So if we come down here to the month of Solus, let's say, on the 23rd day, so the moon was in the last quarter failing, and you can see the first note I have here is hail. I use a generator for my weather. It's a little hex-based one that I will show you, actually. Let's open a separate tab and show you the weather. So this is the table that I use for weather. It's a system that I found on one of the OSR subreddits, I think. And it's broken down into the 4 seasons, and you roll 2d6, and whatever number you land on, that is the weather of the day. And then you roll a number and move into the direction that it says. So using this, every day I generate some weather and communicate that to the players. So on this particular day, it was hailing. The company returned to the town of Holden with half a dozen villagers who they had co-opted into helping them repair their base, because they started with a base. And then we just make notes of what each of the players is doing through the day, what major events happen, and kind of plan out the next couple of adventures. So if we go a little further on to our current play time here, so you can see that we have a bunch of information about an adventure the players recently went on, and whilst that is happening, some of the players are using their downtime to make items and things, so I make notes of when different items are going to be finished. Like here, Charlie's armor was being made by Chodius, so that was finished. And then later on, Chodius finishes his own armor, Devani finishes a staff that she was making, all that kind of stuff. When I'm making these adventures, I will link to the adventure page. So our current adventure is the Cave of Screaming Tomorrow, so I'll link that to the planning page, so I can click into that and reference that if needed, or just hover over it and see. And this is one of my biggest tips to new Dungeon Masters, especially track your time and use a calendar to keep notes. You'll be surprised at how much depth that can bring, because you have all of the references. When the players say, hey, when did we do that thing? You can look at your calendar and you'll be like, well, this is when you did that thing. I know exactly when you did. Okay, so let's take a look at how I organize my compendium for doing all of my world building stuff. We've looked at how I do my adventure planning. Let's look at the higher level and look at the compendium. So go here and expand the compendium, and then I just need to close all of these things down so it's not overwhelming. And you can see we've got a couple of subheadings. So if we click on compendium here, section contains a variety of information based on the information found in the setting guide. My LegendKeeper is accessible to my players, so everything that I make in here, I have to keep that in mind. So anything that I don't want them seeing has to be hidden or in secret boxes. That might not apply to you. So first up, we have beings. This is a list of just every NPC. We'll go ahead and expand that and just click on one. You can see the Maiden Queen, the queen of the country of the Vale, which is where my players currently are. Every NPC has a page like this, a little description of them that is often public if the players have met them. If the players haven't met them, or I don't want them viewing information about them, I hide the whole page. Then we have information, wiki-style information about key stats, and then some secret notes. Sometimes an image, sometimes a little bit more information, but that's the general gist of beings. And this is just every creature that the players encounter that is worthy of its own page of notes gets a page in beings. Then we have the faction list, which I showed off before. Then we have items, which I keep hidden. This is specifically so I can link things to the map, as well as make plans for future items the players might find. Then we have the Pantheon, which you came across before, a page on different races. This was more relevant when we just started playing 5e and I needed kind of constant reminder of the mechanical information of some of the races. I would copy and paste some of their information into that, but I also use this to make notes about some of the custom races that I have in my campaign, such as the Akmiri, which is an ancient race that was destroyed and wiped out and now exists purely as energy that kind of inhabits bodies and clothing and that kind of thing. Then the main part of the compendium is the places section. So if we expand that a little bit, and you can see that there are two main entries. There's the world of Ishtar, which is the material plane, and then there are the planes of existence. If we open that up, my planes of existence are organized in such a way that if the image loads, here we go, you can see a map of my planes of existence. So we have the material plane in the middle, then the ethereal plane that kind of surrounds that, the soul realm, which is where all dead creatures go before moving on. That's all kind of contained into one bound thing. We have the elemental planes, which kind of form the pillars of the universe. And then beyond that, there is the astral sea, which is the kind of space, vast expanse, outside plane connecting place, and then we have all of the specific planes to the different gods. So I break that down based on the axis, the pillars, and the outer planes, and within them we have a note for the material plane as a whole. Don't really make much note here because Ishtar is kind of the only place that the players have been, except for the moon, I guess. Then information on those different planes, and if we go back into the world of Ishtar, you can see there's a whole bunch of stuff here. So if we click on the world of Ishtar, bring up that map, it's a little easier to visualize. You can see each of these black pins is a location, a country, or a region. So over here we've got the Jewel Cities, which is made up of a bunch of different areas. Not all of them are pinned here, but we can go through to there and see all of the information about the Jewel Cities of Talavar, which is this whole continent. Then down here we've got the island of Sengal, and we've got a map for that if the players ever go there. We've got the Shattered Isles of Valoroth, which is where my first campaign took place. If we zoom in there, that used to be just regular land, and then the players goofed and blew it up, and now it's a whole bunch of islands. Then we have Ashk, which is my last homebrew campaign, I made a whole series of videos, which I'll link up here, talking about how I made that particular campaign. And this just gives us information, high-level information on all of those elements. So if we click on the dual cities and expand that out, we've got a couple of high-level pages, so history and culture. Not a massive amount of stuff in there, nothing in fact. We do have some expands in there for information such as the game of Gorgon, which is a sports game that's played in the Dual Cities, as well as some information on things like the Timestone War or Mendax's Rebellion, just some historical events that have happened I like to keep in the compendium. And then the rest is just the pins. Everything that is on that map that's got hundreds of pins on it gets tracked here. Then the next thing I want to show off to you is my page templates. Every project in LegendKeeper has the ability to have template pages, and I use them for most things that I make. So if we go ahead and click on an NPC template, this is when I go to make a new creature that's going to sit in that beings section, I will create from template, and this is the template I get. So we get that public facing description, some areas for secret notes, and then our wiki style information and a space for an image. You can also see on the right here that it is tagged already with NPC, and we're going to talk about tags in a minute because they're a really powerful tool for you to use to increase and improve your games. So same with settlements. If I open that up, you can see the settlement one is pretty dense. So we get the setting guide information, but then we also get all of the information from the doppelganger system for me to fill out. We get information from senses, like asking questions to prompt me as the dungeon master to think about these things. And then a list of generic locations I might want to include in a settlement. I also like to keep track of the danger level, like how likely is it the players are going to be mugged in the street or come into contact with someone that they need to fight in this settlement. Does it have magic items for sale? What is the max item level that the settlement offers? And do they offer spellcasting services? This is really useful for games like D&D and Pathfinder, where the players might want to buy magic items. You can make a note ahead of time and say, right, this settlement does sell magic items, but only to level 3. So the players get there and they say, right, what items have you got in store? You can filter the list up to level 3 and give it to them and be like, these are the kinds of things you're going to find. And then we have plot hooks as well. So we get some knowledge checks or some society checks and some information that they might find out about that settlement. Is a good way to rope in some plot hooks, and then just some space for key NPCs, like who's the leader of the town, who's the local blacksmith, that kind of thing. So I mentioned tags. Now, LegendKeeper has a really robust tag system, which is really useful for finding items really quickly later on. So if we go ahead to the beings section of the compendium here, if we grab just a creature here, so this is Captain Bass, a character from my previous campaign, you can see that the tags are an NPC, but that we've also tagged him as a hobgoblin and with the location of Jabal. This is really useful for later on down the line, maybe weeks and months into your campaign, when the players say, hey, who was that dwarf that we met in Holden? Let's just say, and I don't think, we don't have any dwarves in Holden, so I can be like, you didn't meet any dwarves in Holden. If they say, who is that dwarf? I can just type in dwarf and it gives me a list of the dwarves that they've met in the tags. Now, how useful this is going to depend on you as a game master remembering to do it. I know I forget to do it pretty frequently. Like if, let's say, we have a tiefling, because my players recently stayed in the abode of a tiefling. He's not appearing in the list. Now, I know that his name was Darian Ravenswood. So if we jump and find Darian Ravenswood in the list, you can see here, I forgot to put in the tag. So let's just go ahead and add the tiefling tag and add the tag for where we met him. So I can just add tags that he is a tiefling from Malachite. So if my players then say, hey, who is the tiefling that we met in Malachite, I can filter that and I'll get Darian Ravenswood. It can be difficult to remember to do this on the fly, but if you do, you're going to save future you a lot of headaches and make your life so much easier. So there we have it. That's how I organize projects in my LegendKeeper. If you're looking at this and thinking, oh, that looks really cool, but it's kind of overwhelming, there's a whole bunch of stuff, I don't know where I would start with that, I've got you covered. I have a version of this project called the Icarus Games GM Bible available on LegendKeeper. I will leave a link down in the description below, and that has a an older, slightly pared down version of this entire world in it, with all of the templates, with all of the structure that you can go and just look through and get a sense for how I do things. So you can see when you first click into it, it's going to take a while to download because there's a lot of stuff in there, but it's got all of the templates, all of the breakdown and subheadings, everything that I've shown you in this video is pretty much here, and you'll be able to go through it at your own leisure, have a look, see whether it looks like it would be a useful system for you, glean inspiration and ideas, and I'll leave a link to that in the description below. I'll also leave a link to LegendKeeper, who are the sponsors of this video, so thank you again to them, down in the description below for you to check LegendKeeper out. But until next time, happy gaming.